When discussing the influences behind certain genres, especially those that come from the internet of all places, where influences can come from literally anywhere, it can often be hard to pinpoint who we can actually credit as influential. Take metal, for example. There's usually a clear starting point with some notable examples that have contributed to the development of the genre. Now, while some may argue that there are proto-genre defining acts such as King Crimson, I think it's fair to say that for most people, the canonical start for metal's history can be traced back to Black Sabbath. However, with a genre that's as vast and all-encompassing as Vaporwave can be, we need to retrace our steps a bit. So let's take a trip back in time to one of its most pivotal artists, an artist who can be credited with single-handedly creating the genre, Oneohtrix Point Never. Now, before we get to know the work that would define an internet niche genre, we need to know the man behind the work. Daniel Lopatin was born in Wayland, Massachusetts in 1982, and early on in life, he gained an appreciation for classic fusion records, listening to the likes of Stevie Wonder and the Mahavishnu Orchestra. Though you wouldn't be able to tell from his early work, a smooth yet eerie ambient style which walks the line between beauty and discomfort. His early work in Infinity Window showcases a particular talent in creating ambient soundscapes using his Juno 60, and it's this sound which would become the backbone of his work in his early career. Despite this project, however, it was clear that Lopatin was trying to find his own creative vision, and he would leave this group entirely to pursue his own solo project. He would later don the name Oneohtrix Point Never off of a play of a Boston radio station, 106.7 FM. This would be oddly fitting, considering the kind of music and themes he would delve into later into his career and the genre that he would make with his work. His debut album under this project would be Betrayed in the Octagon. This album would be seminal to his drone-like aesthetic, making heavy use of his Juno 60. And while drone might not be for everyone, it was clear that Lopatin was still learning and still building a repertoire for both smooth and noisy sounds off of this record. Lopatin would continue with this style with his next two records, Zone Without People and Russian Mind. Both maintained his drone aesthetic with further emphasis on his synth work. It was simple, but it worked, and would be enough to garner some attention from labels. Despite the attention that he was receiving, Lopatin was still evolving and trying to find different ways to change up his style of music. And he would delve into this evolution way more in his seminal breakout album, Returnal. Now, fair warning, if you've listened to the other albums that I've listed in this video so far, Lopatin basically takes that sound and yeets it out the window and immediately, right from the get-go, tells you that this album is something totally different. Its intro track, Nil Admirari, Ferrari, sorry. Its intro track, Nil Admirari, feels like a punch to the gut, blasting you with everything from noisy synths to booming distorted drums and wailing vocals. Lopatin at this point could have filled his record with noise and really just go in that direction, which, credit to noise artists, have their own successful scene, and he apparently is really good at it. Lopatin instead shows us that he isn't afraid of fusion. Just like his childhood influences, he injects a bit of humanity into his noise. And going from in-your-face, abrasive noise to soft human touches with melody isn't an easy feat. But it's the contrast between those two styles that Lopatin excels in. Going from abrasive noise to points of serenity and ambience is what he's become known for. Notably the vocals, which are distorted and at times eerie, shows us that there's something developing there in terms of theme. Returnal would be incredibly successful critically, receiving an 8.2 on Pitchfork and a number of top album of the year list credits from a wide array of music publications. It became clear that Lopatin's change in direction would be one that he could stick with, but could he follow it up? The short answer, yeah. This is Replica, an album unlike any of OPN's previous works. For the majority of the record, it feels like Lopatin's literally grabbed his Juno, threw it out the window in exchange for cassettes and samples. Not really. The synth work is actually quite beautiful here. At times noisy, but also as if everything is running through a cassette player. A cassette player that's going through glitches, repeating on occasion. It's as if you're listening to the sounds of another world, one that doesn't quite exist, yet tries so hard to replicate our own. Now, I'll be completely upfront and say that Replica is one of my favorite records of all time, not just because of the eerie, droning samples and the incredible synth work in between, but I feel that Replica perfectly encapsulates everything that Vaporwave is supposed to be. Especially today when so much of the community is splintered off into separate subgenres and fighting over what is or isn't Vaporwave, which, to be fair, I've been guilty of. It's incredibly refreshing to come back to this record after a period of time and hear how the vocal samples work and the intention of them. From top to bottom, Replica grabs samples from literally everywhere, from what sounds like a sample of Hank Hill, to instruments and endless vocal chops in between. Replica isn't afraid to break convention, to recontextualize whatever it finds in our world and morph it into something that has the inklings of being recognizable, but just comes out of reach. Daniel Lopatin would comment on the album for Spin saying, "I often don't know and don't want to know how I want a song to sound. A lot of what happened with this record was people were like, oh, you took sounds from YouTube's, or whatever. And I was like, no, I didn't take sounds from YouTube's because I didn't want to input into a search query what I wanted to hear. So when I got all these commercials, I just ripped the audio. I didn't watch them, I would just listen. And when things would strike me as being harmonically intense at that moment, I'd sample it and cut it up and throw it in a folder on my desktop. It has the samples, the themes, and even the synth work which would become relevant in later years. At this point, if we were to name an album as being the representative of all Vaporwave going forward in its decade-long history, an album that has all the themes, the production value, and the synth work and samples, to me, it would be this. It holds every aspect of the genre at its core, not just pieces of it like other albums. To me, it is the essential Vaporwave album. But to others, we need to talk about an album that sandwiched itself in a different alias between Returnal and Replica. Chuck Person isn't an alias that drew many eyes initially, but to people that were paying attention, it's here that Lopatin would be experimenting with different styles that he wasn't comfortable putting out yet on OPN. It's here we get to see Lopatin really try his hand at sample manipulation, which would not just be a staple on Replica, but all of his albums going forward, coupled with a particularly odd YouTube channel that came almost out of nowhere. It seemed that Lopatin was trying his hand at delving into a commercialized aesthetic from another time and recontextualizing it for the modern age. Something nostalgic. And that's the key word, nostalgia. Nostalgia is what permeates throughout the entirety of Echo Jam's Volume 1. This album, to many, would be on the Mount Rushmore of Vaporwave-defining albums. It doesn't make use of synths at all. It's cheap, but not in a bad way. More in a way that's a statement to the idea of recontextualization. Now, I know I've used that word a lot throughout this video, but I think it's important to note how Lopatin has used this theme throughout the entirety of his career. So it almost seemed that through the guise of OPN, Lopatin never really had the opportunity nor the freedom to really delve into this theme. But through the anonymity of the internet, Lopatin had the total freedom to chop, cut, screw, distort whatever sample he wanted. With ultra famous songs like Africa and artists like Tears for Fears, which would get copyright striked in an instant, and today, Lopatin didn't care. He just took what he wanted and played around with it like he wanted. And all of it was possible just because he knew how the internet worked, and he knew that being anonymous, it didn't matter. He could do whatever he wanted. Some call this album a joke, but to me, I feel like this is more of a statement on artistic freedom, because on the internet, there are no rules, and Lopatin knew that. A lot of people in the Vaporwave community contribute the founding of the genre to a bunch of different artists, from James Ferraro, which I'll cover in another video, all the way to Vectoroid with Macintosh Plus even. To me, I always consider Daniel to be the silent father of the genre, one who, despite not paying any attention to the genre, knows how much of an influence he's had. Because I feel that Lopatin shares the same feelings when it comes to the endless amounts of music and sounds that we can play with, and that there are no rules when it comes to sampling. The idea that you can find something from out of nowhere, make it work, and create something entirely new. And with that new thing comes a whole array of new feelings that the old work never intended. Lopatin would release a remaster of Echo Gems Volume 1 in 2016, because at this point, Vaporwave had grown to become an entirely different beast from when it started. Now, it wasn't much, but to us, it felt like Daniel was giving us a wink or a nudge that while he might not be involved with the genre in any way, he appreciates that there's producers and listeners and artists like-minded like him. People that just want to listen and make whatever they want, because they can. Thank you guys so much for listening. This is like my 30th take on this, and I'm really trying to get used to this whole setup. I hope you guys enjoyed the video. I hope to do more of these kind of things from a wide array of different genres. Oneohtrix Point Never has been a huge influence on not only my music, but to many other artists I know. Leave a comment down below if you have any ideas of what albums and or artists I should cover. I hope you guys enjoyed the video, and I'll see you guys next time. Thank you so much.